Evet, zamanımız geldi. Artık başlayabiliriz herhalde. Sayın konuklar, katılımcılar hoş geldiniz. Bugünkü oturumumuzda büyük bir, çok iyi bir konuğumuz var, çok önemli bir konuğumuz var. Başlamadan önce...
All customers want that. What is so unique about your product that the customer is really attracted, and we call that customer wow, customer delight, that there is some unexpected feature that you provide that nobody else provides, and it's that unanticipated delight that triggers your customer loyalty, and so on. So there are a number of things that perhaps we can deliver in terms of what we call customer Six Sigma. And then let us look at the whole subject of leadership, which is probably the weakest link in the practice of Six Sigma that I have seen all across the United States and other parts of the world too. If there is one fundamental weakness associated with Sigma, it's not your quality, it's not your cycle time, it's not your lean thinking, it may not even be your customers, but it is the quality of your leadership. And you have to recognize that the role of a leader is totally different. It's not just to manage a company. The role of the leader, the true leader, is to help your employees grow, help them develop, so that they can reach their God-given potential and reach for the top with encouragement, support, and guidance from the leader. That's the role of the leader, not just to manage or to micromanage and so on. In terms of some of the key aspects of that leadership, we say a leader, a true leader, has got to have profound ethics. He's got to have full trust in his people so that the people in turn can trust him. And there has got to be an active help in terms of emotional guidance, technical guidance, managerial guidance, and so on. The object here is for the leader to make the employee grow. How many of our present-day leaders enable the employee to grow, enable to reach this potential, which really has no limit of the human being? We can do so many more things, provided we have that kind of leadership. And then perhaps the right type of motivation for the people through inspiration, through leading. A leader's role is to take a company where nobody else has gone before. That kind of vision, that kind of inspiration is what is required. And finally, we'd have to say that the role of the leader is to act as a coach, as a guide, not to micromanage things and not to be necessarily bossy. But we could go on and on the subject of leadership. I say that it's the weakest link so far that I have seen in the development of Six Sigma. But it has to be done. And in terms of organization, what are some of the do's and don'ts associated with Six Sigma in terms of an organizational structure? First, I think, is what we refer to as the curse of Taylorism. Now, this is what the Japanese do very, very well. And the curse of Taylorism is that in the Western mind, we separate the managers and the workers. We think that it's the role of the managers to think and the role of the workers to work, and never the twain shall meet. That is probably one of the most pernicious philosophies associated with management. We've got to dismiss and dismantle Taylorism as much as we possibly can. And then we want to change an organization from what we refer to as a vertical organization into perhaps a smooth team organization, a horizontal organization where different elements drawn from different disciplines of engineering, production, service, purchasing, and so on, form a team. And it's a horizontal organization, and so we have to change the whole culture associated with what we refer to as departmental cubbyholes, which hardly then talk to one another, into a smooth cross-functional team that can attack these problems associated with customers. And we need to go from what is called a tall pyramid to a flat organization. Typically in American companies, and I presume in European companies, particularly the large ones, you have as many as 15, 16 levels between the top management, the CEO, and the lowly worker. It's a very vertical organization and makes for very poor communication. We want to flatten that organization so that no matter what the size is, you could probably have 100,000 people. No more than 5 levels between the CEO and the worker. No more. Then you have communication. Then you have ownership of the people at the lower levels. Then you're not micromanaging, but you're managing through the inspiration associated with the various teams and so on. So I think all of these things are important. Of course, training is very important. You can't have a workforce that just does things. It's got to be trained. It's got to be coached. And you have to support that training. You have to encourage that training. And training is a lifelong enterprise in itself. And then finally, you have to have what is referred to as gain sharing. And that simply means that the fruits of whatever productivity you have got to be shared equitably with the people. What about the situation that we have today in America, where you have companies that are losing money and the CEOs are laying off the people and cornering to themselves huge bonuses, huge incentive plans, while the company is losing money and losing employees? That is a recipe for disaster. And we have to say that if there is going to be gain sharing, there's going to be some equity associated with it. That is one of the first things that we have to recognize in an organizational sense. And now we come to the subject of employees. And again, I think we have to recognize that we have several different levels of what we might call worker employment. The first level is that perhaps they take on responsibility for quality, for delivery, for cost within their own areas. The next may be that they take on various non-business activities, say, for instance, like running the cafeteria or running the sports items and so on, things that are not directly related to the business, but which can be managed entirely by the employees. The final proof of the pudding is where the employees take over everything, what we sometimes refer to as a mini company. Now, a mini company is the ultimate in the ultimate Six Sigma. And in a mini company, you break up a company into small business units, each being their own profit centers, each having responsibility not only for profit and loss of that little business enterprise, but also responsibility for bringing in people on their own free will, of firing people on their own free will, of perhaps determining the future paychecks and so on. In other words, it's a total responsibility at that mini company level, and then perhaps have the CEO or the top management of the company merely keep their fingers to guide these mini companies around. That is the ultimate. Very few companies have gone that route. And then, how much time do I have?
We still have about 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes.
About 15 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, well, you're being very generous. Okay.
We started late.
All right. Again, when we're dealing with suppliers, the usual tendency is to go out and get 3 quotes and select the lowest bid supplier. That is 19th century practice. It's not even 20th century practice. That is the dumbest idea that you can have. We're not saying that all suppliers have got to be on a different footing that I'm going to tell you about. But certainly your key suppliers, the ones that perhaps do maybe 80% or more of your business, but constitute only maybe 10% of your total supplier base, those are the key suppliers that you want to develop a partnership with. And the first aspect of that partnership is that it has got to be done on the basis of a win-win policy, not a win-lose contest. In other words, the supplier wins and you win. The usual tendency today, and this is practiced by many of the big companies, including General Electric, is a win-lose situation where the company wins and the suppliers lose, and pretty soon you've lost the confidence and the support of your key suppliers. That's pretty dumb. But that's what Jack Welch, who is noted for his management capabilities at General Electric, he introduced these dumb ideas for which General Electric is suffering today. So you have to convert your key supplier base into a win-win partnership and then bring the supplier in, because now you have chosen those suppliers. You haven't seen the necessity to go elsewhere. You have chosen those suppliers based upon their capability, based upon their quality, based upon their cycle time, based upon their cost. And then you say, Mr. Supplier, you have to give us a continual cost reduction every single year. Maybe 5%, maybe 6% every single year. But in so doing, we will allow you a floor for your profit. In other words, we're not going to take your profit away, we're going to enhance your profit. And in return for this cost reduction, that is what you're going to be entitled to, we will come up, because we are the senior partners, we will roll up our sleeves, we'll go out to the supplier, the key suppliers, we'll help them, help reduce their quality defects, help reduce their cost, help reduce their cycle time, and in return, both sides win. So that is a totally different philosophy, and we don't see that as part of our Six Sigma operations in many, many parts of the world, but that is truly the ultimate Six Sigma. We can move on into the area of design. And here again, there are a number of things. And this is, of course, in the design, one of the key factors that we want to introduce is the concept of innovation. Innovation is very, very important, but innovation is not something that only few people have through the gift of God. Innovation can be learned. Creativity can be learned. And if you promote that creativity, and perhaps 3M is one of the finest examples of that promotion of creativity, although it's gone back a little bit in these last couple of years. the fact is that by having a continual stream of innovation, allowing the designer, allowing your employees to come up with ideas so that the realm of ideas is not just in management, it's in the design team, it's in the production team, it's in the service team. They all can contribute these ideas. And as a result, you can see that there are a number of different things that perhaps can be done. So I've given you here a list of, I won't go into all the details, but the whole area of design is very, very important. And again, let me just go on to maybe manufacturing, which of course is more familiar to you. And here, of course, there are some disciplines that are necessary. For instance, we want to make sure that when you have a good design, it is designed for robustness. What does that mean? That simply means that when your product gets into the hands of the customers, there are bound to be factors that are beyond your control. Customer misuse may be a very important factor. And the engineer will generally say, but that's not my responsibility. If the customer uses it, that's his problem. Today's situation is that you have to protect your product against customer misuse. You have to protect your customer against some of the environmental factors that are beyond your control. And that is what we mean by design for robustness. And some of the techniques that we use for those kinds of things are what we refer to as the subject of component search and variable search and so on. We also want to make sure in the pre-production area that all of your important parameters have a CP and a CPK greater than 2. That is essentially, a CPK of 2 essentially means statistically 6 sigma. You've got to make sure that the product is completely characterized, which means that many times specifications are pulled out of the air by designers and manufacturers, and they may be well in excess of need, or they may be insufficient. So it's always good to make sure that your product is characterized by a relationship going directly to the various customer inset, and make sure that you can then have realistic specifications and realistic tolerances. There are a number of other things in the manufacturing area. For instance, we speak in terms of product scrub, process certification, and positron. What that means is that many times there is a departure from good manufacturing processes in a company, in a manufacturing setting. And you have to make sure that all of those particular anomalies associated with the development of a process, with its functioning of a process, are touch bases. We call that process scrub. Make sure that all those anomalies are clearly eliminated. And then you come up with a list of very important quality characteristics, and that is then framed in a positron setting so that you make sure that for every process, every machine, that you attempt to have essentially a chart which indicates what are the important parameters, who is to control them, where are they to be controlled, how frequently they should be controlled, and so on. And that is a way in which you make sure that that process is actually behaving. There are also a repetition of MIOST. You have MIOST in design, but you also have what we call mini MIOST in production, which makes sure that the design integrity that you have established in MIOST in design are not degraded in production as a result of workmanship problems, supplier problems, tooling problems, et cetera, et cetera. And then we talked about OEE a little bit before. We talked about pre-control being better than control charts, but lately we go even more towards the Poke-Yoke methodologies and so on. Okay, I think that pretty much covers the general area. Now, what about business processes? Now, here again, I think we have to recognize that this is an area of weakness. And the first thing we want to establish is a management steering committee that determines which business processes we must perhaps pay attention to. Who are the key people who are going to be associated with that process? Establish these teams. And then go to the concept of the next operation as customer. We all respect the external customer, but the internal customer we treat like dirt. For instance, if you take engineering, the immediate customer of engineering is manufacturing. But does manufacturing pay much attention to, does the engineer pay much attention to manufacturing? Hell no. And as a result, we have to change the whole concept that the next operation becomes the customer and evaluates the previous operation as the supplier in terms of his or her quality performance, delivery performance, cost performance, and so on. And then, of course, also to go into what we call out-of-box thinking, where you may not necessarily have a set procedure, a kind of a flow chart, which I will show in the next chart. That is to establish a particular methodology. And we refer to that in the business process engineering as the IS chart. And then we say what are some of the savings that we can achieve, and we go to a should chart. And then we go even further into a could chart. But the real thinking associated with business process improvement is what we call out-of-box thinking, where you go completely different. As an example, take the budgeting process. The budgeting process usually takes anywhere from 3 months to 6 months to a company to finalize. And it goes back and forth between the department to the controller, to the general manager, to the CEO, and down again. And the chances are that you've gone halfway into the year and the departmental budget is not finalized. Out-of-box thinking says, forget all that methodology, forget all those rigmarole associated with procedures. Instead, let the CEO, let the general manager decide that based upon his sales forecast and so on, that there's going to be a 5% increase in everybody, and then only manage by exceptions. And so the whole budgeting procedure, instead of dragging on for 3 to 6 months, can be finished in 1 week. That is the kind of out-of-box thinking that we are talking about. So I think there are several different things. That's some of the, but finally, what are the results that we can expect? First, in terms of customers, what are the parameters that are really important for a truly Six Sigma operation? One is perhaps the percentage of customers that you retain. Secondly, the customer's perception of value added by you as a company. And the third would be the reduction of the customer base. In terms of leadership, you have to assume that the leadership is primarily concerned with helping people grow. How many of them have converted, let's say, from management to leadership? If you take a survey in the United States, 99% of the CEOs are managers. Only 1% are leaders. What is your Six Sigma operation in converting managers into leaders and so on? And also with respect to employees, and finally with respect to the financials. Let me just close with a few general remarks that Mr. Bhote has asked me to speak about in terms of the future associated with Six Sigma. Six Sigma, as currently viewed and as currently practiced in the United States and elsewhere, in my judgment, is not enough. It is elementary. It is flawed. Why? Because there is some attempt at quality improvement, some attempt at cycle time improvement, some attempt at design improvement, and some attempt at supplier enrollment. But on the key people issues, the issues of customers, the issues of employment, the issues of organization, and especially the issues of leadership, it hasn't been practiced. And that's why we say that Six Sigma is not enough. If you now elevate that Six Sigma into the concept of the ultimate Six Sigma, then I think you have certainly credibility associated with it. But that concept has not been accepted very much in the United States because people are used to the same old things. Again, another criticism that is leveled at Six Sigma is the fact that it concentrates only on quality, it concentrates on bureaucracy and making things happen properly from a quality point of view, and as a result, creativity is lost. Now that is a total false reading of what we mean by the emphasis on innovation and creativity, especially in design. It's there as an integral part of what is needed for Six Sigma, but especially in design. So my feeling is this, ladies and gentlemen, if you have embraced the concept of Six Sigma, and you have done well, and you have essentially traveled on the road to quality improvement through Six Sigma, and cycle time improvement through Six Sigma, by all means continue. But please, enlarge your horizons. Look at the big picture, because the big picture means the road to business excellence runs through people, runs through customers, runs through organization, and above all, ladies and gentlemen, it runs through dynamic leadership. Thank you very much.
Sayın Keki Bhote çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Aslında her ne kadar vaktimizi doldurmuş olsak da varsa şeyden de dinleyicilerden de sorusu olanlara sorusu olan birkaç soru belki alabiliriz. Bir kişi var orada, evet.
What's the difference between early equipment management or early product management and design of experiment? Are there any difference?
The difference between early equipment management and
equipment or product management and between
design of experiments.
Well, I think let's start with the design of experiments. The objective of design of experiments is to make the product robust. That means it has to be robust against customer misuse, against